Why would 12 states ban an 89-cent can of sweet corn from being used as fishing bait? Not because it's dangerous, not because it harms the water, because it catches so many fish from shore that wildlife agencies decided it wasn't fair. Canned sweet corn is the single most effective shore fishing bait that almost nobody in America uses. It catches carp, catfish, trout, bluegill, crappie, and in the right conditions, largemouth bass. It works from the bank, from a dock, from a pier, and it requires zero specialized gear. A hook, a few kernels, and about 10 minutes of patience. That's the whole setup. And it has been the most popular bait in European competitive fishing for over a century, while American anglers walked right past it in the grocery aisle on the way to spend $14 on a jar of commercial dough bait that doesn't perform half as well. I first saw corn used as bait in England. I was visiting family outside Bristol and tagged along to a local reservoir where maybe 15 anglers were spread along the bank. Every single one of them had a tin of sweet corn sitting next to their rod. No tackle boxes stuffed with soft plastics, no spray bottles of scent. Corn, hooks, a folding chair, that was the whole operation. I asked one of them why corn, and he looked at me like I'd just asked him why he was breathing. Because it catches everything, he said. He'd fished that reservoir for 30 years, his father before him. The idea that someone wouldn't use corn didn't compute. That was 8 years ago. Since then, I've tested corn across 23 bodies of water in 9 states, compared it head-to-head against commercial bait products at the same price point, and collected catch data from over 200 viewers who ran the experiment after I mentioned it in a comment section last summer. We'll get into exactly what corn does underwater that makes it so effective, why certain states ban it, and whether those bans actually make scientific sense, how to rig it so it stays on the hook instead of flying off on the first cast, and where the triple your catch claim comes from with real numbers behind it. And stick around to the end because there's a simple modification using one additional grocery store item that boosts corn's effectiveness by about 40%. It's something European match anglers, the guys who fish competitively for prize money, have been doing for decades, while American tackle companies pretended it didn't exist. You know that frustration of shore fishing, where the fish are dimpling the surface 80 feet out, and your best cast lands at maybe 60. You try a heavier weight. You wade out a couple of steps. You put everything into the cast and gain maybe 5 feet. The fish are right there. You just can't reach them. Every shore angler has lived this, and nearly every shore angler tries to solve it the same way. Cast farther. Longer rod, heavier sinker, better technique. But distance is only half the problem. The other half, the one nobody talks about, is concentration. How do you get fish to gather in one specific spot within your casting range instead of chasing scattered individuals across 100 yards of shoreline? Commercial fishing operations figured this out centuries ago. You don't chase the fish. You give them a reason to come to you. Same principle as a bird feeder in your backyard. You're not running around the yard grabbing sparrows. You put seed in one spot, and the sparrows show up. Corn turns that principle into a shore fishing strategy. And it works because of 2 things happening at the same time, one you can see and one you can't. The visible part is the kernel itself. A single corn kernel is roughly a 1/2 inch long and a 1/4 inch wide, about the size of the nail on your pinky finger. That puts it in the visual sweet spot for panfish and small to medium game fish, big enough to see, small enough to eat in one bite. But the color is what separates corn from every other bait in this size range. Corn is bright yellow, and yellow happens to be one of the most UV reflective colors in the visible spectrum. Fish can see ultraviolet light that humans cannot. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Experimental Biology confirmed that many freshwater species, including carp, trout, and most of the sunfish family, have UV-sensitive photoreceptors in their retinas. Under natural sunlight, a yellow corn kernel underwater fluoresces in the UV range, creating a glow effect that you can't see standing on the bank, but that acts like a small beacon to any fish within visual range. In clear water with decent light, that signal carries roughly 8 to 12 feet, about the length of 2 car doors end to end. I tested this at Saginaw Bay in Michigan, along the western shore of Lake Huron, using a very unscientific but convincing method. 2 identical rigs, 15 feet apart, one baited with corn, one with commercial yellow doe bait that was roughly the same size and color to my eye. Over 4 hours, the corn rig caught 11 fish. The doe bait caught 4, same yellow to me. Apparently not the same yellow to the fish. The UV fluorescence of real corn versus synthetic yellow dye is different, and the fish knew it, even if I couldn't tell. The invisible part is what happens as the corn dissolves. Canned sweet corn is packed in a brine of water, sugar, and salt. Each kernel contains about 0.3 grams of dissolved sugar. When that kernel sits in lake water, the sugar concentration inside is significantly higher than the surrounding water. That difference creates what's called an osmotic gradient, a slow, steady leaching of dissolved sugar molecules outward through the kernel's soft skin. Fish detect those dissolved sugars through their olfactory pits, the small openings on either side of the snout just above the mouth that funnel water over sensory tissue. A single kernel produces a tiny plume, but scatter a dozen kernels across a 10-foot area, roughly the size of a parking space, and those individual plumes overlap into a scent cloud that fish can detect from 30 feet or more, depending on current. That's the feeding station. You're not putting one bait in the water and hoping. You're building a zone that pulls fish toward your hook using 2 senses at once, vision and smell. Remember that UV signal I mentioned? It compounds with the sugar plume. The fish sees something glowing in the UV spectrum from 8 feet away, and at the same time, it picks up a dissolved sugar trail drifting toward it from 30 feet. Those are 2 independent triggers converging on one location. Commercial doe bait gives you scent only. A bear jig gives you visual only. Corn gives you both, working in parallel, 24 hours a day, as long as the kernels are in the water. No reapplication, no spray that washes off in 3 minutes, no dip that dissolves before a fish gets close enough to investigate. And that right there is the idea that changes everything about shore fishing. Stop trying to cast to the fish. Start building a reason for the fish to come to you. That shift in thinking is worth more than any rod upgrade or casting lesson. If you've been shore fishing for any amount of time, you've already felt this instinct without having a name for it. Those days when you noticed the fish were concentrating near a fallen tree, or under a dock where people throw breadcrumbs, or near a culvert where runoff carries bugs into the water, you were witnessing natural feeding stations. Corn lets you create one wherever you want. Run the cost math, and it gets uncomfortable. A jar of commercial doe bait, the kind marketed at shore and bank anglers, costs $8 to $14 depending on brand. One jar lasts maybe 4 or 5 trips. If you shore fish 25 times a year, that's 5 or 6 jars annually. Call it $60 per season. Over 15 years, $900 on doe bait. A can of corn costs 89 cents and lasts 2 full sessions, feeding station included. 15 years of corn totals about $170. The industry wasn't going to hand you that comparison. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe. We've got more of these coming. Rigging corn on a hook is simple, but one mistake ruins it for most people who try. A size 8 to size 12 bait holder hook is what you want. That's a small hook, about the length of your thumbnail from curve to eye. Mustad and Daiichi both make solid bait holders in this range for under $3 a pack. Eagle Claw makes a budget option that works fine too if you're just starting out and don't want to invest much before you see results. The hook has tiny barbs on the shank, small angled nubs that point backward and grip soft bait to keep it from sliding off during the cast. Thread 2 or 3 kernels onto the hook, piercing each one through the flat side so the hook passes through the thickest part. Leave the hook point barely exposed, just the tip poking out of the last kernel. The mistake is using too large a hook. A 1/0 or 2/0 hook, the kind you'd normally pair with a soft plastic worm for base, is way too big. It splits the kernel on the hook set, that upward sweep of the rod you do when you feel a bite, and you reel in nothing but an empty shank and a bruised ego. I did this for 2 entire outings before a British angler on a forum explained what I was doing wrong. Smaller hook, multiple kernels, point just barely showing. That's the rig. Line matters too. You want 4 to 6 pound monofilament, the standard clear nylon line that comes pre-spooled on most spinning reels. Heavier line is stiffer and more visible in water, which spooks cautious fish. A small split-shot weight, those round lead pellets you crimp onto the line with pliers, pinched about 12 to 18 inches above the hook, roughly the distance from your wrist to your elbow, gives enough casting weight to reach 30 to 40 feet from shore. If you've built your feeding station properly, 30 feet is all you need. For the station itself, take a handful of loose kernels, roughly 20 to 30 pieces, and scatter them around your hook placement, not in a tight pile. Spread across an area about 3 feet wide, roughly the width of a standard doorway. You want fish foraging through the zone, picking up free offerings, building confidence, and eventually finding the ones hiding your hook. This scattering part is what gets corn banned. Multiple states classify spreading loose bait around a hook as chumming, and chumming is illegal in many freshwater fisheries because it concentrates fish artificially, which, if you think about it, is the states admitting that it works. Let me be direct about the legal picture because this matters more than any technique. As of 2024, corn as bait is restricted or banned in Utah, Oregon, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, New Mexico, Iowa, Vermont, and several others with partial restrictions depending on the specific body of water. Laws vary widely. Some states ban corn on all waters, some only on designated trout streams. Some ban the chumming method, but allow a single kernel on a hook. Before you try any of this, check your state's fishing regulations. They're free online for every state. Search your state name plus fishing regulations and look for the bait section. A game warden citation for illegal bait runs $100 to $500, and that will ruin your Saturday faster than a snapped line. I've heard of anglers getting fined in Oregon for having a can of corn in their tackle bag near a trout stream, even without evidence they used it. Don't take the chance. In states where corn is fully legal, which includes most of the Southeast, the Midwest, and the Mid-Atlantic, you're clear. The triple your catch claim comes from real numbers. Last summer, I posted a comment on one of our earlier videos asking viewers to try corn for 5 consecutive trips using the feeding station method and report back against their previous 5 trips with their usual bait. 214 people responded with specific data, locations, and what they'd been using before. Average catch rate without corn was 3.1 fish per outing. With corn using the station method, the average jumped to 9.4. That's a 3 times improvement across a sample large enough that fluke days wash out. Gains weren't uniform. Panfish anglers, guys targeting bluegill and crappie, saw the biggest jump, from 4.2 to 14.6 per trip. Carp went from 0.8 to 3.1. Catfish from 2.4 to 5.7. Bass results were the weakest, 1.8 to 2.9. Still a 60% improvement, but not the triple that panfish and carp anglers reported. Weight distribution surprised me more than the raw numbers. Across all species, average size per fish on corn was 22% heavier than on the angler's previous bait. My best guess is that the feeding station pulls multiple fish into one area, and when several fish gather around food, The bigger, more dominant ones push to the front. You end up catching the top of the local hierarchy because those fish eat first when there's competition. A viewer named Tom on Lake Norman in North Carolina landed a 9-pound channel catfish on corn during the experiment. Biggest fish he'd caught from shore in 3 years. He'd been buying commercial dip bait the entire time. Think about that. Same bank, same water, better fish. 2 conditions where corn is a waste of your time. First is spring turnover, that period in early spring when the entire water column mixes as surface water warms and begins to sink. During turnover, temperature layers shift unpredictably. Dissolved oxygen levels fluctuate from surface to bottom, and fish scatter instead of holding in consistent zones. The whole point of a feeding station is drawing fish to a fixed spot. During turnover, there's nobody to draw. The fish are roaming. Turnover typically lasts 1 to 3 weeks, depending on lake depth. During that window, switch to moving baits. An Eagle Claw Trocar TK 130 flipping hook, that's a heavy-duty hook with a surgically sharpened point, paired with a creature bait on a Texas rig, where the hook point is buried in the plastic so it slides through cover without snagging, lets you cover water and find actively feeding fish instead of sitting in one spot waiting. Second is excessive boat traffic. On busy weekends at popular launches, engine noise and fuel residue from constant boat traffic disrupt the scent plume that makes the station work. Boat wakes scatter your loose kernels and break up the sugar gradient before it builds. If you're fishing within 200 yards of a busy ramp on a Saturday morning, the station gets destroyed every few minutes and never establishes a consistent signal. On high-traffic days, walk the bank. Even a quarter-mile from the ramp makes a dramatic difference. Find a stretch where the only sound is your reel clicking and try the station there. This is the part I learned from a match angler in Birmingham, England, and it's the reason I stopped using plain corn over a year ago. Flavored Jell-O powder, not prepared Jell-O. The dry powder straight from the box. Open a can of sweet corn and drain about half the liquid. Pour 1 packet of Jell-O powder into the can. Strawberry and orange work best. I honestly can't fully explain why strawberry consistently outperforms other flavors. It just does, and the English match anglers confirm the same thing without any coordination from me. Stir the corn and powder together, seal the can with plastic wrap, and put it in the fridge overnight. By morning, each kernel has absorbed the mixture. The color shifts to bright red or orange, which amplifies the UV fluorescence I described earlier. The scent plume gets stronger because Jell-O contains citric acid and artificial flavoring compounds that dissolve faster than the corn's natural sugar, and the gelatin forms a thin coating on each kernel that makes it firmer, so it survives 2 or 3 casts instead of crumbling on the first one. On Kerr Lake, right on the Virginia and North Carolina border, I fished 2 identical setups side by side across 6 fall outings. Plain corn averaged 7.2 fish per trip. Strawberry Jell-O corn averaged 10.1. Same spots, same hooks, same mornings. The modified corn also stayed on the hook for an average of 2.4 casts per kernel versus 1.1 for plain, which meant less time rebaiting and more time with a hook in the water. Over on West Point Lake in Georgia, a guide I swapped notes with tried the Jell-O method with his shore fishing clients for an entire month. His trip logs showed an average jump from 6.3 fish per half day to 11.8 with the modified corn. 2 of his clients bought annual fishing licenses on the spot. They'd never caught that many fish in their lives. A can of corn is 89 cents. A box of Jell-O is about $1. Under $2 for 3 or 4 full sessions of treated bait. Nobody at the tackle counter is going to point you toward the baking aisle. There's no margin in it for them, no pro staff deal, no sponsorship, no affiliate link that pays a commission. But the best shore anglers on the planet have been using this for decades. Now you know what they know. Next time we're getting into why the same bait at 55 degrees catches completely different fish than it does at 75, and how water temperature changes everything about where you should be casting. But for now, one Saturday, count your fish.